The most important factory on Earth does not look like an oil field, a navy base, or a central bank. It looks like a semiconductor fab. Quiet, clean, and unbelievably precise. That matters because modern power no longer depends only on fuel and steel, it depends on advanced chips. And a huge share of the most capable chips still flows through Taiwan. This is why a Taiwan disruption would not stay a regional story for long. It would travel through the systems that already organize modern life: phones, servers, data centers, cars, weapons, medical devices, telecommunications. The AI boom made this even more intense because the most advanced computing now depends on a smaller set of cutting-edge production lines than most people realize. The world talks about software and algorithms, but the bottleneck is still physical. It lives in the factories. That is the first thing many people misunderstand. Chip manufacturing is not just another industrial process that can be copied anywhere once the money shows up. A leading-edge fab is an ecosystem. It requires specialized equipment, stable power, ultra-pure water, extreme precision, supply chain discipline, and a workforce trained to operate one of the hardest manufacturing processes on the planet. You do not replace that overnight. You do not replace it just because a politician announces a package. That is why governments have become so focused on semiconductor resilience. The Chips for America program exists because advanced chip capacity is now treated as strategic infrastructure, not normal manufacturing. Once the modern economy started relying on increasingly advanced processors, semiconductors stopped being just a business story. They became a national capability story. If the chips slow, the future slows with them. Taiwan matters because it sits at the high-value end of that system. TSMC's own reports make clear how central advanced node production has become to its business, and by extension to the industries built on top of it. That means the world's dependency is not only on chips in general, it is on a very specific layer of chip making, the ability to reliably mass-produce the most advanced logic at scale. The closer a system is to AI, high-performance computing, advanced smartphones, or leading defense electronics, the more painful that concentration becomes. This is where geopolitics enters the story. The semiconductor race is now tied to export controls, industrial policy, and military tension. Washington is trying to build more domestic capacity. Allies are trying to diversify. China is trying to reduce external dependence while pushing harder on self-sufficiency. But all of those moves share the same hidden confession. Everyone knows the current map is fragile. If the system were already resilient, nobody would be racing this hard to rebuild it. And that is what makes a Taiwan chip shock so dangerous. The damage would not begin as one cinematic moment. It would begin as delays, shortages, reprioritization, and panic about allocation. Some sectors would be protected first, others would wait. Prices would rise. Delivery windows would stretch, roadmaps would slip, AI deployments would slow, high-end hardware would become harder to ship. Defense procurement could tighten. The first phase would feel like friction. The later phase could look like a global technology choke point. There is also no clean substitute story. Other fabs matter, other countries matter, and capacity is expanding. But a shock is not measured by whether replacement exists in theory. It is measured by whether enough replacement exists in time. Semiconductor systems do not reward vague optimism. They reward yield, experience, and operational continuity. Even if the world eventually adapts, the gap between disruption and adaptation is exactly where the damage happens. That is why Taiwan's chip industry matters far beyond Taiwan. This is not a narrow island story. It is a story about how much of the modern world quietly depends on concentrated excellence. One part of the planet became extremely good at making the brains of the digital age, and now everyone else has to live with what that concentration means. If Taiwan's chip supply breaks, the world would not just lose components, it would lose time. And in technology, time is power. It determines who ships first, who scales first, who wins contracts, who trains bigger models, who upgrades faster, and who falls behind. That is why the semiconductor map now looks less like commerce and more like strategy. The island does not just manufacture chips, it holds open a crucial lane in the system that runs the century.